Greetings to the Alabama National Guard and to all those taking the time to engage in our panel today, Empowering Those in Boots. Let's take a moment and review what empowering really means. It simply means to make someone stronger and more confident, especially in their life and claiming their rights. The panelists here today and myself are dedicated to building readiness, bringing awareness, and strengthening our military community and their families. I am your host, Paulina Woods, currently a domestic violence integrator with the Alabama National Guard's Integrated Primary Prevention Team. So you're wondering, what is IPP? It is a Department of Defense workforce designed to lead integrated prevention activities and work closely with commanders to identify and overcome barriers to readiness by our military community. The department pursues a holistic approach to integrated primary prevention at preventing harmful and violent behaviors. IPP is comprised of 4 programs: domestic violence, sexual violence, workplace harassment, and self-directed harm. Studies have shown that many behaviors share the same risk and protective factors. As a team, we're intervening to reduce one risk factor, boost one protective factor, and minimize multiple forms of behaviors. Overall, our goal is to implement prevention systems to foster a culture of respect, encourage help-seeking behaviors, collaborate with DoD and non-DoD agencies to maximize our resources. With that being said, I'd like for each one of the panelists today to introduce themselves. We'll start with you, Miss Jennie.
Hi, my name is Jennie Tice, and I'm the Training and Outreach Specialist at the Family Sunshine Center. We are a domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking agency, and we serve survivors through counseling, residential services, and other supportive services like legal advocacy and child advocacy as well. We serve 7 counties in the River region. They're Autauga, Butler, Chilton, Elmore, Lowndes, Montgomery, and Crenshaw County. We have staff at least once a week at all of those counties to help with the community and people who need.
Thank you. And so we'll move over to Brinkley, if you could give us an introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. My name is Brinkley Jones. I also work for the Family Sunshine Center. And yeah, Jennie talked about our services and the areas that we serve. And so, again, thank you for having me. We're excited to talk about what it is that we do.
Absolutely. Miss Helena?
Yes, I am Helena Young with the Alabama Army National Guard Behavioral Health Program. So I have a team of 6 members who are located around the state to provide services to our Guard and their family members.
Awesome. And Miss Keyana?
Yes, good morning. My name is Keyana McKinney. I am the Sexual Assault Prevention and Response Officer for the SAPR program. And basically what SAPR is, it's a DoD-wide program that assists service members in reporting sexual assaults. And those sexual assaults can be while in service and also before they actually join the service. We provide advocacy. Our advocates are DoD certified advocates. We provide referrals to mental health services, legal services, and also provide protective orders for our service members. And so excited to be joining you today.
Thank you, ladies. We really appreciate you having time to be on our panel today. So, Miss Jennie, could you just briefly describe the different types of domestic violence and what forms of abuse that they take on?
Yes, so sometimes domestic violence can be called intimate partner violence, family violence, dating violence. The main thing about domestic violence is that it's a pattern of abusive and coercive behaviors that are designed for the perpetrator to take control over the survivor. Domestic violence, a lot of people, because it's called domestic violence a lot, they think that it's violence, physical abuse. But that's not actually how abuse starts in a relationship. Usually there is emotional abuse, mental manipulation that starts before any sort of physical violence even happens. It helps to break down the person's self-esteem. They may not trust their instincts anymore. Makes them question things. And so usually most survivors describe their perpetrator as being really great in the beginning, Prince Charming. It was like a bait and switch happened. So we see that emotional abuse occurring. We also see financial abuse. It's the most common type of abuse in domestic violence. And what that does is it makes it really hard for people to leave, to be empowered, to sustain themselves on their own and their families. And sometimes that's controlling money. Sometimes it's interfering with jobs, hiding keys, harassment at work, things like that. So it's not all about the money. It could be opening credit in their accounts under their names and ruining their credit. Also, sexual abuse happens in domestic violence cases as well. Sometimes as the cycle abuse goes around, that's a way that sexual violence can be coerced then, because there's just been a violent incident, and then there's a makeup period where the survivor is not really wanting to do that because they've just been assaulted or called names or things like that. And so there's a lot of coercive sexual abuse and also rape that happens in domestic violence relationships as well. And I think we have some other qualified panelists who'll be talking about that in a minute.
Absolutely, yes. So would you mind sharing the relationship between substance abuse and domestic violence?
Yeah, so when you look at people with substance use disorders, you see they have, the majority of them, vast majority, have trauma in their background, either in childhood or as an adult. So when we try and cope with things, and we do that sometimes as professionals, we cope in ways that maybe are maladaptive, not the best, And so they may have a drink, they may start using substances to try and cope with the trauma, the pain, to numb themselves, things like that. Also, sometimes that perpetrators will use drugs, alcohol, in order to control the survivors. They will get them addicted, and so they can make them more compliant. It can be used as a threat against them. If you leave, I'm going to call DHR and tell them about this. And so it can be encouraged, besides being used for coping by survivors, it can be encouraged by the perpetrators so that they can maintain control better, make them more dependent, use against them later.
Right. Thank you for educating us on that. We appreciate it. So, Brinkley, can you share ways that a survivor can reach out for support or help?
Yeah, absolutely. For our particular agency, anybody can call us at any time of the day, night, holiday, whenever. It's 24/7 crisis response that we provide. That number is 334-263-0218. And someone can call if their home is unsafe, if they're in danger, or if they have questions. Maybe they don't know, they think that maybe their relationship is maybe abusive, but maybe they have concerns. Someone, a trained responder can help them safety plan in that initial phone call. Or they might want other services. We provide counseling and, as Jennie mentioned, legal aid. And so we can, if someone calls that number, we can find them whatever their need is, we can fill that need. Other ways people can reach us is online. We're at FamilySunshine.org. We also have a Facebook page, other social media. We also take walk-ins in our counseling office, so you don't need an appointment. Somebody is stationed from 8 to 5 at our administrative offices. And so those are all the different ways that somebody can access services. And the very last thing I'll mention is that our services are for primary victims of violence, but also secondary victims. So maybe nothing happened to me, but it happened to my friend, and I am having trouble supporting them and processing this. I could go receive therapy.
Perfect. And that leads me to my next question. Why do some people hesitate to reach out for support?
There are a lot of reasons. Like I mentioned, a lot of people don't call domestic violence or consider that they're going through domestic violence in the moment. It's oftentimes after someone's removed from a situation that a picture becomes clearer. It might be an issue with what they perceive. They don't think of it as abuse, or they don't think of it as particularly a bad problem. Or unfortunately, some people think I can handle it, and they don't. They might have a negative connotation. They might think that I don't need help, and they might not want to be seen as receiving services. And then also they might, as Jennie mentioned, a lot of these relationships don't start abusive and negative, and just because maybe an abusive act has happened, it doesn't erase the good memories that someone might have of a relationship. And so that, in addition to people's preconceived notion about what domestic violence is, what it looks like, and this is particularly common with male victims. They might not, they might fear that they'll be perceived as weak, or they might think that this can't happen to men, or they might feel like they're an anomaly. And so all of these sort of feelings of shame might prevent somebody from seeking services. Another thing is the fear of the unknown. What is the phrase? It's the devil you know versus the devil that you don't know. That can keep people from seeking services. And the last thing I want to hit on is that, unfortunately, with domestic violence and sexual assault in particular, victims often feel a lot of self-blame and guilt. And when we feel guilty about somebody or something, we don't like talking about it. Even more so when they have someone in their life who is deflecting responsibility and saying, this is your fault. So all of those components can prevent somebody.
Absolutely. But I think the biggest thing here is that we want to encourage help-seeking behaviors and letting everyone know that it is okay to seek help, no matter your situation, big or small. And so Brinkley and the Family Sunshine Center do offer free and confidential services. So next we'll talk with Miss Helena. Miss Helena, what are the long-term effects of abuse on survivors' mental and physical health?
Thank you. And I will say the long-term effects of domestic violence on a survivor's mental and physical health can be profound and lasting. So the things you may see in a survivor is the post-traumatic stress disorder, and that is their reaction to the trauma. It could be nightmares. It could be being triggered by certain things. Also, there's depression and anxiety. So again, it's directly related to that interaction, that experience that they've had. Low self-esteem has been brought up. So if someone is a survivor of domestic violence, it does impact how they view themselves. Guilt is also associated with that. Then you move on to, again, substance abuse was brought up. So a way of coping could be using substances to kind of deal with the trauma that they've experienced. One that we also see is the suicidal thoughts and behaviors. So a lot of times looking for ways to escape. So that's why it's so important to reach out to these resources to let them know that there are other ways to heal themselves. And lastly, I'll say it's difficulty trusting in relationships. So you will have people who are survivors, but they still have a hard time maintaining or connecting with others beyond that situation.
Okay.
And so that's kind of the mental side. I'll go a little bit on the physical side. Some things you may not realize would be the chronic pain.
Okay.
So someone who is in this situation and has this experience, sometimes your body tells on you. I always say your body knows. So experiencing chronic pain or cardiovascular issues, it's just having stress on your body that's maintained can really impact it. Sleep disorders, and the last one I'll say is a weakened immune system. Someone who's always sick. They never kind of get well. It's always a cold or always something that's causing them to not be able to fight off the things that most of us could.
That's very good information that a lot of us may not be aware of. Yeah. So can you share some ways that we can show support to our fellow service members, our friends, and our family members that may be facing violence and abuse?
Sure. I would say the first and probably the most important is to be non-judgmental and to be a good listener. A lot of times I know, want to protect those we love, and sometimes our emotion will take over from that situation and start telling people how they should handle it. And that can be hard for someone who's in this situation to absorb because they have to kind of process this on their own. So another good task is to help them by offering emotional support. So just being there and letting them know that you care. Connect them with resources, kind of like the resources like the Family Sunshine Center, just to make sure that they know there's a good support system out there. And lastly is back to developing a safety plan. I think there's a stat, and I don't want to misquote it, but one of the most dangerous times of leaving a domestic violence relationship is once the person has decided to leave. Mm-hmm. So having that safety plan and going over it to make sure that they're keeping themselves safe is very important.
Absolutely. That is very crucial in the process. So Keyana, can you share some perpetrator behaviors that can be threatening or cause fear in our survivors?
Absolutely. So a lot of this stuff was already mentioned, but when we look at behaviors from perpetrators, as clinicians or advocates or providers, we look at it, those are textbook behaviors, right? We know they're red flags. But when you truly when you're talking about an intimate partner, a family member, someone that resides in your domicile, you care about that person, you love that person, right? And so you're more susceptible to see the good in them versus the pain that they have caused you. And so outside of all the stuff that the panelists have mentioned, I want to bring up one in particular is intimidation, right? Or threatening to harm the children or the pet. That just shows that I can escalate these things, right? Also manipulation. They are master manipulators, right? And then lastly is stalking. This is one that the criminal justice takes extremely serious because it's unpredictable. It's dangerous, but it's unpredictable, and it typically escalates to violence.
And I don't think that there's a lot of information out there on stalking and human trafficking and how that is a form of domestic violence.
Absolutely.
So it's good that you brought that up. Thank
Absolutely.
you. So what are some ways that our community, that the military can end domestic violence within our force?
Yeah. Let's just be prevention champions. Right?
Absolutely.
Right. Let's win this fight by first understanding that domestic violence is an issue. We have to first understand that domestic violence has plagued our society and that approximately 10 million people will experience domestic violence each year in our country, right? So we first must understand that it's an issue. And when we do know that it's an issue, we support survivors, right? When they come forward and they talk about domestic violence, we don't victim blame. We support them. We hear them. We tell them that we care about them, and if they need our assistance, we're here to help them through that process. And lastly, as she mentioned, respect their decision to stay or leave, because again, leaving typically turns into a fatal situation for victims of domestic violence, right? And then I also want to say that when you see harmful behaviors, these red flags, call it out. Families, friends, co-workers, call that behavior out. And then we must teach our children what healthy relationships look like. Children model behavior, right? And so if we show them early on what a healthy relationship looks like, I think we can break the cycle of abuse in our country.
Oh, yes. Healthy relationships are so important, not only in our personal worlds, but definitely in our professional world as well. Having healthy professional relationships within our force will definitely build cohesion and readiness. So, as the prevention teams have all got together, as well as these community resources, this is what we're offering to the Alabama National Guard. We're here to educate and end domestic violence and other harmful behaviors. But there is one thing that we need from the Alabama National Guard's service members. And as the IPP Domestic Violence Integrator, I ask that you take 100% participation in the DOCS and the CCA. Many of you may have heard that the DOCS is the Defense Organizational Climate Survey and the CCA is the Command Climate Survey. When you participate in these different surveys and assessments, we take those responses and utilize that data to drive our program and its efforts. That data from the DOCS and the CCA shows where improvement is needed within our force. And as the Integrated Primary Prevention Team, we will be using that data to know exactly where our efforts are needed to get into the units and try to make a difference in ending domestic violence. To the panelists here today, I say thank you so much for taking the time to empower those in boots. Thank you all who viewed the panel, Empowering Those in Boots. We are encouraged and dedicated to stopping and ending violence within our force. We hope that you've been empowered and you can share this information with your family, your friends, and your fellow service members. Don't forget to celebrate Domestic Violence Awareness Month. It's October. Thank you.